At home with a lifetime of stories and songs, people we've met and the places we've gone. Along the way found where and how we belong. At home with a lifetime of stories and songs. Welcome to More Songs and Stories from Home, podcasts that give voice to songs with stories and stories with songs written and being written over the course of a lifetime, often illuminating the journey we all make, together and alone, finding our way home. I took my dad's advice and returned to the University of Washington for my senior year. Competition to get into medical school was fierce, my childhood dream of becoming a doctor out of reach. Dreams of a future in music or finding ways to make the world a better place, unformed and, until a few months ago, uninformed. A friend of mine was setting up a new department at the university, speech communication. She invited me to transfer my transcripts from the sciences. She also helped me develop an independent studies program. It involved auditing classes in the newly formed African American Studies program, trying to see it through the lens of communication and speech. I have few memories of what that involved, but I'm pretty sure I was both invigorated and intimidated. The Black Student Union was newly formed at the University of Washington. In a student population of 30,000, African American enrollment had tripled in 1968 from 150 to 450 students. We were a long way from waking up to a world that's truly equitable, diverse, and inclusive. Simon and Garfunkel sang at the University of Washington homecoming that fall. Someone asked if I would drive Art Garfunkel and the group's manager, Mort Lewis, to the airport after the show. As the concert was ending, I was backstage with Mort Lewis and some suitcases. I sheepishly asked him if he had any advice on getting into show business. He looked at me, looked at the suitcases, back at me. "Son," he said, "when the music stops, pick up those suitcases and start walking." Little did I know that Mort Lewis also managed the Brothers Four, and that a few months later I'd be sitting in his office in New York, listening to him laugh about how we met and how he'd gotten his start in show business carrying suitcases for the Stan Kenton Band. Three astronauts circled the moon and saw the first Earth rise. Frank Borman read from Genesis. No one asked if God had died. The Earth looked like a world at peace that Christmas night in space. Held tight to that illusion, the end of 1968. The fall of 1968. So a friend of mine had set up a new department, speech communication, and I'd taken a speech class earlier the year before and did really well in it and really enjoyed it, and so I thought, well, I'm gonna change my major. I'm gonna go to speech communication from zoology, and earlier that year, the Black Student Union had initiated a lot of changes at the University of Washington, and I was looking up recently what they were, and one of them was that they had quadrupled or tripled the number of black students in a university of 30,000. They'd gone up from 150 to 450. uh, and then they'd insisted on adding minorities to the faculty, and they'd also began their first black history classes were offered, and so in this tied in with speech communication, I began to take some black history classes, and would go to a class in speech communication and tie those two studies together, and it seemed like a pretty nice fit, and I was enjoying that, and then in November I got to cast my first vote for president, and like I say, my dad knew and trusted Hubert Humphrey, or knew about the Democratic Farm Labor Party in Minnesota, and knew about Humphrey, what he'd done, and talked about what he'd done for civil rights, and as far as in the years earlier, and so reluctantly, but when I looked at the character, what I thought of, there was no question that the first vote for president that I would cast would be for Hubert Humphrey, and in retrospect, it looks, I felt that it was maybe the most important one for years and years that I cast, and because the character, well, anyway, until 2016, when I thought that was a pretty important one too, and the character between to have voted for Hillary Clinton was certainly the right thing and for me to do. And at the same time, at homecoming, a few guys in the fraternity were working on it, and were going to bring in Simon and Garfunkel, and they asked me if I would like to be the driver for Art Garfunkel and the manager, Mort Lewis. You bet, glad to do it. I'll pick him up at the airport, I'll bring him back to the airport, and this will be great. And so I did, and so I went both nights. Friday when the alumni came, and then Saturday with the students, and it was amazing. And I remember picking up a string that Paul Simon had left in the dressing room and thinking, this is kind of amazing. And Mort Lewis, he said, okay, before the last number, and he kind of explained what the last numbers were going to be. He says, I want you on the side of the stage, ready with the bags, and then when we're done, we're going to go straight to the airport. And so, yes, Mr. Lewis, and so I stood there and kind of an amazing thing to be at, again, kind of rubbing shoulders with show business or whatever it was, and all of it, and so I was kind of quiet, but then I figured, this is a chance of a lifetime. So I asked Mr. Lewis. I said, Mr. Lewis, can you help me get into show business? So looked over like that again, and he said, do you see those bags that you're sending? Yes, sir, I see those bags. He said, when the music stops, pick up those bags and start walking. And so, yes, sir, Mr. Lewis. That was, and so probably a better answer certainly than a question, but it was a special experience for me. Thank you for watching or listening to more songs and stories from home. Come back next time for part 6 of 1968, knowing you're welcome here, at home with a lifetime of stories and songs.